So Lori Kemp, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Why are you running?
Because there is a need for what I've called the regular folks in the 2nd District to have representation. I haven't felt represented, so I know that people that are, like less privileged than I am, there's no way they can feel represented. Whether it's my personal beliefs, the abortion ban that we currently have, I want to restore what should be a woman's decision back to the women. We've not had, again, we have the least productive Congress ever. So basically we're paying them and they're not working. In my job, which if you don't know, I am employed right now. This is my lunch hour. If I showed up and didn't work, I would be let go. And I think it's time that we let our congressperson go for not working also. So I just want to restore some accountability and representation to the people of the 2nd District.
What kind of experience do you have that lends yourself to say, you know what, I'm ready to be a congressional representative?
I am one of those folks who can't say no. My husband jokes about it all the time, but if there's something that needs done, I do it. I am a graduate of IUSB, Criminal Justice, which is the School of Public and Environmental Affairs. So I've, kind of studied up on public policy and so on. Worked in criminal justice here in South Bend, then moved on to banking, and I did both private and some commercial banking, which kind of gives me a little bit of insight into, what happens, interest rates and so on and so forth. And currently I'm employed as a manager at a software company. So I manage people, I go train, I travel all over the country to train users on how to use our software product. I also do QA. I wear many hats. It's a small company, so I test our product to make sure it works. And last but not least, I do contract compliance. We have data that has health information and private information, so I have to make sure that we're following all the regulations to keep that information safe. I've volunteered on boards, both for the South Bend Community School Corporation, a private board I was the treasurer on. And so I've just kind of done everything, and kind of my last thing for the last 6 years, I've been coaching high school diving. And honestly, if you want a job done and you want a job done right, hire a coach. They know how to get results. They know how to get people to work together. And so, with all of that, I'm going to cobble together, working for the people.
What do you think is your number one issue? There are lots of issues out there, and they seem to be generally the same from race to race all across the country. What is your number one issue?
I kind of have two. I know that's kind of a cop-out, but first and foremost, this is most literally the most important election of our lifetime. That's not me saying this. This is me going out and talking to constituents all over the 2nd District, which I have 11 counties, give or take, parts of 8, all 8, and then parts of 3. And everywhere I go, I hear people say, this is the most important election of our lifetime. I can't believe I'm saying this. And we're talking, an 87-year-old gentleman walks up to me. So protecting our democracy first and foremost, and then restoring women's rights. Where you live should not determine whether or not you're considered a full human being. And I kind of like what the former Mayor Buttigieg has been saying about it, is that if we're going to draw a line about women's reproductive health, we need to let the woman and her healthcare provider draw that line. So, restoring Roe v. Wade is, again, tied with preserving our democracy and strengthening our democracy so that, everyone has full faith in our country.
You did not mention the economy, and I'm not suggesting you don't think the economy is important, but where does that rank in your list, and how would you describe the state of our economy right now?
It's one of those kind of yin and yang, right? Because the economy is doing, honestly, very well. Economists all over the world, conservative as well as not as conservative, are saying, we're leading the G7. But to a regular person, kind of even like me, if I wasn't running for Congress, I'd be like, oh, what does that matter? So inflation is on the way down. Interest rates are on the way down, although housing, I think, took a little spike today. So our economy is good, but the people heading to the grocery store aren't seeing it yet. And when people ask me about that, because it is very important, but here's the tricky bit. Most of the inflation that we're seeing is not inflation, but it's greedflation. Companies are taking advantage of our post-COVID economy to raise prices. We know that's a fact. A Kroger executive testified that they just kept raising prices because they could. When you hear people on the street, well, how do we fix that? And I mean, honestly, they're calling us communist and that, or socialist, and that is how we would mostly fix pricing, right? So we have to use common sense regulation to make sure that we don't tip into those isms that nobody wants. But the government can't just say, oh, we're gonna cut these prices, right? People would be up in arms about that. So we have to use common sense legislation to make sure that people are not price gouging, and we can do that because they do that during disasters and so on. And for me, when I grocery shop, I'm a regular working person. I live and die by my budget. I have a kid in college, so I feel it. On one hand, I have a 401k. I don't have a pension. I have a 401k. So the stock market's been doing good, so that makes me happy. But then I go to the grocery store and I'm like, is my 401k only doing good because I'm paying this much more for eggs or whatever? So I do know that we need to address that, and I am hoping that we can, again, not sliding into any isms, but enact corporate reform that will help keep greedflation out of the picture.
Vice President Harris has talked about the issue of price gouging and talking about making that one of her platforms to try to bring down the price of milk and eggs and bread and all the core things, gasoline, et cetera. But the economist who looked at that said the amount of greed, while it is there, is negligible in what we have seen with inflation. What else can you do besides saying, all right, corporations, you're hereby banned from doing this, and let's say they do that. Does that answer all of it in your mind? What else can you do?
It doesn't, and it's such a complex issue, right? Especially when we talk about, here we're in the breadbasket of America and farming, and what affects farmers when they price, milk and eggs and things like anything that we're buying. I would like to see. You may not be aware, or you may be aware that they've been kicking the Farm Bill down the road. The Farm Bill as it stands, or as it would be, could be very detrimental to Indiana farmers. They want to enact some changes that would harm a farmer, charge more for the insurance, but they'd get a lesser payout, which we haven't had any really big natural disasters around here, so farmers haven't had to use the insurance and so on. But if we do, which we have seen, climates, Asheville, North Carolina, inland flooded because of a hurricane. And so it's all interrelated. So we kind of have to, again, look at the big picture. We need to sit down with experts and all of these fields, and is it really that greedflation is not that big of a deal, or is it that the corporations are downplaying it? Oh, we raised it, but not this much. And so it will take some deep digging and a lot of working together, right? Not only with other legislators, but with the beacons of industry and farming in our country.
How long would that take?
Probably
people will like it this week.
Yes, it will probably take more than my 2-year term. If I win, to be honest, right? None of this happens quickly. You can look back to when you have a president in office, what happens probably at least a year or two into the next president's term is based on the policies that the previous president enacted. We know that the CHIPS Act, the bipartisan infrastructure, they're working right now, but they didn't happen the second. The CHIPS Act, building a factory, we all know that doesn't happen overnight. Building a house doesn't happen overnight. So we need to be patient, and sometimes patience is painful.
Yeah. Let's move on to another issue you discussed, and that issue is abortion. You said that was one of your primary issues, or reproductive rights. Most Democrats favor trying to codify Roe versus Wade, trying to bring it back on a national level. Do you include yourself in that?
I do. Again, where you live shouldn't determine whether you're treated as a human being or not. And we know that women are dying because of the extreme bans. And, again, Pete Buttigieg says it way better than I ever could. If we're going to draw a line, we need to let the woman and her physician draw that line. I have no business being involved. And what I've been really surprised with, again, as I travel my 11 counties, pastors are coming up to me saying, we agree. Just yesterday I had one say, God gave us free will, and while I would hope no one in my family would have an abortion, I have to let the woman make the choice. I had another pastor say, my son came up to me and said, what legislation, and Kamala hit Kavanaugh on this, what legislation do we have that, controls a man's body? And he said, so while I am personally against abortion, it's not my right to choose for someone else, and we don't know what anyone is going through. And we do know that these laws are causing doctors to pause, and women are dying. We know in Fort Wayne, a 6-year-old child was left motherless because of the ban here in Indiana, and that's not pro-life.
Do you support any limitations on abortion?
I do. I'm not. People keep throwing out the abortion after birth. Okay, that does not exist. It's already against the law. I had a person I called out in Fulton County because he's like, well, they're going to stop people that come in, and he went like this at 7 months and say, oh, I suddenly don't want this child. And I'm like, that is not happening. We know that is not happening. If someone has to have an abortion later in the pregnancy, we know it's devastating. They've most likely, I know when I was 7 months pregnant, we had names picked out, we had a nursery started decorating, we had people that had bought us, little clothes, and at that point it would have been devastating. And so, again, a physician knows best. And if you're talking about for medical reasons, again, I'm going to leave that to the doctor and the woman. I do believe that what we had codified under Roe in Indiana was appropriate. And, again, nothing untoward is happening, and people know that. It's just to strike fear or make people angry. And honestly, that's a horrible thing to do. When you know something is not happening and you lie about it, that's not how I was raised. That's not a Hoosier value.
Medicaid currently covers only abortions in very limited circumstances, the life of the mother, rape, incest, etc. Should that be expanded to cover all abortions?
That's a tricky one because we know that poor women, okay, because you're talking Medicaid, so that's for people that have limited means. Family planning is a way out of poverty. And to help women, that could be beneficial to them economically, but I know a lot of people that kind of crosses the line of I don't want dollars going to support this or that. So I would have to speak to more constituents, have them weigh in, and again, we don't want people doing things that they don't support, but we don't want people stopping people from doing things that are none of their business. And again, we have other religions that do not follow the same tenets as what the current abortion ban is. We know that because they filed a lawsuit. And so we kind of have to, again, look at this with a broad picture. And again, I would have to look a little bit deeper into what the constituents would support. But, again, I would be more for making sure that we support all kinds of contraceptives and education to make sure people don't get pregnant in the first place. Isn't that the best way to solve this problem?
Let's talk about immigration. It's something we haven't discussed yet, but it's obviously a major issue, not only nationally, but it's a major issue in this campaign. The immigration issue right now is a hot button, and everyone claims to have the answer, but it's a tricky situation. What is your answer to handling the issue of illegal, not legal, but illegal immigration?
Well, I wish that our current people would have passed the bipartisan immigration bill that was put together by Republicans and Democrats. That would give us a start. People that are crossing the border illegally, we do need to stop that. We need to make sure that anyone that wants to come into the country is entering at a point of entry, declaring why they're coming. I am not for anyone breaking the law. One thing that is really hard for me right now is, whether or not you're aware of it, you probably are, my opponent is running an ad that looks like they closed a school to house immigrants. It's a lie. As a Hoosier, again, raised with Hoosier values, my parents taught me not to lie, to tell the truth, to be compassionate. These were people that were housed in tents, and there was severe weather coming, so they moved them to a structure that wouldn't be in danger of being battered by the elements. And for him to allude to the fact that they're going to close schools, I mean, that's a disservice to every one of us in the 2nd District. It's a horrible take, and I'm going to tell you, as your congressperson, I'm going to fight to make sure that the most vulnerable about us are kept safe. Where they were left, they could have been harmed or killed, and is that okay? I mean, for people that claim to be pro-life, when we have immigrants that are coming into our country, we see a lot of people losing any compassion. And I agree that, yes, we need to do something, but we can do things that are compassionate. Again, the bill that we had, while not an end-all be-all, was a great start. And MAGA Republicans said, no, we don't want this because we want it to be an election issue.
Why, let me ask you, why did it take the Biden-Harris administration 3.5 years to take any action to try to stem the tide of record immigration? By all circumstances, you look at any statistic, the illegal immigration issue exploded over the last 3 years under the Biden-Harris administration. Why did it take so long for them to acknowledge, okay, this border bill hasn't passed, let's take some action, let's take some executive action and try to bring things back down, because it's worked?
Yes, it has, and I think something that typically always hits Democrats is that we try and overdo the kindness, maybe, try and follow the rules, right? Because it was an executive order that he had to do to get it to stop because they wouldn't pass the bill. So again, you sit there and you have people complaining about executive orders. I hear it every day. Well, they did an executive order. Well, okay, so our people that are supposed to be governing would not govern, so they stepped in. Should they have stepped in earlier? Yes, probably. But again, when you're sitting there trying to follow the rules, if you will, sometimes you just, you try too hard. I mean, we try and do that. We try not to sling mud and everything, but then when your opponent is just telling a flat out lie, it's really hard to stay quiet and above the fray, if you will.
So with being compassionate, what should happen to the people who come in to the United States illegally once they are into the United States? The level of sustainability for social services, for example, in places like New York City and Chicago, it's not sustainable. But a lot of the people are showing up unannounced. We don't know they're showing up. They'll show up by the busloads, and suddenly New York City and Chicago and the rest of them have to worry about housing them, feeding them, protecting them, et cetera, taking care of their health care costs. That's not a sustainable working model, according to the people, even from the Democrats running some of those cities. What do we do?
Well, obviously someone's putting them on a bus, right? So we need to address it before they get on that bus.
Does that mean that all of that burden sticks with the border states and taking a national problem and saying, all right, Texas and Arizona, it's up to you to handle this?
No, because we should have federal border places and persons, which is what the bill would have done, right? Increase judges for those that want to declare asylum, adding border patrol agents and facilities. We could literally take it out of the hands of the states and again look at who's coming in. I mean, if you're putting someone—
Are you talking about detention camps?
Well, not, I mean, we need a facility to process, right? Because someone coming in to claiming asylum cannot work. So the longer it takes, I mean, they have to be able to be held somewhere. And so I'm not talking a camp, I'm talking somewhere that is, hospitable. When I talk about compassion, I want you to do this just for a second. Close your eyes and imagine, I don't know if you have children or not, but what would it take for you to walk thousands of miles or pay a coyote to take your child somewhere? What would it take? Because I have sat with my eyes closed trying to imagine it, and in my ridiculously great country of America, I can't. And so for these people to do this, we know that they are in dire straits. They're not coming on a whim. No one walks 1,000 miles on a whim. And so for people to be so callous as to say they don't deserve at least our consideration, it lacks empathy. And it hurts my heart, right? It's not how I was raised, not at all. This is not a Hoosier value. A Hoosier value is we help those. And the ones coming in seeking asylum, they cannot work until they are either granted asylum or not, and then we send them back. Ones that are coming in legally, we try and process them, and if they're not here legally, we send them back. We know during the Obama administration, more were sent back than in any time in current history.
Do we have the capacity currently to handle that in some sort of an expedited fashion when you have anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 people per day to come in? You have to vet them, that process takes a little while.
Well, and we've been working with Mexico. Mexico's been helping, either stopping them at their border, even getting into Mexico, or when they get here, helping us do the paperwork so that we can vet. According to many economists, our country needs these immigrants. Part of the reason that we're leading the G7 are immigrants that are working the jobs that we don't want to do. Let's be honest. We know in places, where they told lies about Springfield, Ohio, they've helped turn around the city. I mean, we have officials from the city telling us that. I know J.D. Vance.
And those are legal migrants.
Yes, those
migrants.
are legal. Those are that have claimed asylum and are here legally. And according to the MAGA Republicans, they're going to ship all those people away. We know in Indiana we have dying rural areas, and immigrants, again, vetted and processed, are people that could help us build our economies and our cities back.
Let me ask you one more immigration question before we move on. The immigration question is about the illegal immigrants or undocumented migrants, however you'd like to phrase it, who have been in the United States for a long time, sometimes more than 10 years. The latest statistics show it's about 11 million undocumented migrants living in the U.S. right now, 2/3 of them for more than 10 years. And other than the fact that, for many of them, not all of them, but other than the fact that they enter the country illegally, that's essentially been the last quote-unquote crime committed. They've otherwise lived a lawful life beyond that. How do you handle those people without being unfair to the people who did it correctly, by going through the process, by going through the asylum process, by going through an official port of entry and going through that same process? On the issue of fairness, how do you rectify the two?
That is a hard one, and I don't know that there is a fair way to go about this. The DREAM Act or DACA would kind of help in that way. I know people that I have met people as I'm campaigning that are undocumented, and I have met people who waited and did everything the right way. They came through, got their paperwork, and it's a long, drawn-out process. So again, if we could get more judges, if we could get more people so that we could, we have more people to vet, we'd have more people to hear cases, and we could move people through more quickly. And again, it's a very complex issue. Most of the immigration law that we're living under was last, I think, addressed during Reagan. The world has changed, our country has changed, our needs for workers have changed.
And all that's true, but that doesn't necessarily address the people who have been here. Should they be allowed to work towards citizenship? And if so,
yes.
if that is the case, if your answer is yes, do they pay a penalty? Do they have to pay some monetary thing? Do they have to go back to their country of origin at least to fill out the paperwork? I don't know. I'm asking what the solution would be to try to rectify the two between the people who did it legally and the people who didn't do it legally.
I think that and I know they always want you to go back to the country, but I feel like we could address it in a way where, again, part of the complaints about immigrating is the cost. And typically the people, they don't have a lot of money. They're coming here to make their lives better, much like the result of immigrants. Most of us are, right? My great-grandparents came from Poland, probably didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. So I would like to see something that, again, probably the same time frame, but I mean, do they need to go back to their country? Can we vet them here? If they're working, what good does it do to take them from their jobs? I mean, we know that many of the undocumented pay into Social Security, and until they're documented, will never get a penny back. I know that the other side likes to say that they are, but we know that's not true. And so I think, we have to address the disinformation first and foremost, and then we have to work toward redoing all of our immigration laws so that it's not as cumbersome as it currently is or time consuming as it currently is. And then we have to address, what do we need from immigrants? Do we need computer workers? I work in a software company, and I know for a while we had, we needed, because we couldn't find them locally. Do we need migrant workers to work the farms? We know that. We know if the MAGAs deport everyone, we'll be paying plus $20 a head of lettuce. We know that we need them for our economy, but it's easy to dehumanize them and make them our enemies. And so I think we just need to sit down and look at, so what does someone coming in legally have to do? And if you've been here for 10 years and came in illegally, how do we kind of equate that without making it an undue burden?
Okay. Let me ask you a crime question. Are there too many guns on the streets?
You mean because we have like 4 per person? I mean, and that's with counting people that don't own a single gun. Again, I'm a criminal justice major, and I know that common sense gun legislation works. We know that the assault weapon ban worked. And so whether you want to say there's too many guns on the street or, do people own too many guns? It's up to you how many guns you want to own, but we need to make sure that we are using common sense legislation to make sure people that shouldn't have guns don't have them. I personally know a woman who had to go to court to get her abusive ex-husband's guns out of his home. And I don't think anyone wants someone who has threatened violence to anyone to be having a firearm in their home.
Second question related to that. There's a bigger argument. You mentioned the assault weapons ban about a weapon like the AR-15, which has often been like the weapon of choice for a lot of mass shooters, school shooters, etc. Should the AR-15 be limited? And if so, what do you do with the ones that are already out there?
I'm not sure.
Or really any semi-automatic rifle?
I don't really want to take anyone's guns away from them. We do know that certain weapons are problematic. I mean, a gun is a tool.
Should it be banned from this point forward?
I would definitely vote for that. I do believe that, again, I know hunters. We're in Indiana. I mean, every other person hunts, right? And every single hunter I know, and this includes, hunters that are veterans, have said to me, we don't need that type of weapon to go hunt. Yep. One of the veterans, when I was speaking to him, he said, when you go on base, you turn your weapon in. You don't, unless you're in a war zone, you don't walk around with your weapon. So, when people are talking like this, he said, it strikes me as a little kind of odd because especially if you're a veteran, you turn in your weapon, you don't carry it around with you. So, yes, we can definitely use a return to common sense legislation to make sure that we keep guns out of the hands, especially of domestic abusers, and that we're not having everyone carrying an AR-15 around.
Sure, we're running a little short on time, but I wanted to ask you a foreign policy question, or actually a couple of them. One's Israel, the other is Ukraine. The United States has essentially, for the history of Israel, blanketly supported Israel, whatever it needs to continue into its existence. Are you satisfied with that policy? Should it change?
That one is a tricky one because we know, so, when you talk about Israel and weapons, right now people are focused on Gaza, but Israel is under attack from many different directions. It's not just Gaza. And so I am for continuing to protect the Israeli people, but with conditions. We have to make sure that, in anything, that they're, not committing any type of genocide, which people like to talk about. But we know that Iran is firing against them. So again, we need to make sure that the weapons that we give and the actions that Israel itself are taking are appropriate.
Do you believe Israel is committing genocide now?
I don't know. I don't have enough. I mean, I'm not a congressperson. I don't get top secret information. I believe that we need a ceasefire, we need to end the war, and we need a two-state solution. That is the only way that any kind of peace is going to happen, and I want peace. I'm a mom. When I hear about people being, weapons, missiles being sent, my heart breaks. Nobody wants their child to die, and we need to ceasefire, end the war, two-state solution.
Let me ask you about the Ukraine and specifically Vladimir Putin. Should the United States maintain a level of support for Ukraine regardless the cost, so Vladimir Putin doesn't expand further?
Yes. Putin, we know, right? I'm a child of the Cold War, bomb shelter in the basement. We know that Putin wants to restore the Soviet Russia to what the Soviet Union once was. He is the kind of person, we give him an inch, he's going to take a mile. So it's Ukraine now, Poland next? Where does he stop? He doesn't. And that's what is so distressing when my opponent and other MAGA folks, they're like backing Trump, who literally bends his knee to Putin. Putin is not a man that is going to just stop out of the goodness of his heart. We know that. If he had any goodness in his heart, he would not have attacked Ukraine. So we do need to make sure that we are standing with our allies and making sure that we stop Putin before he gets any further than he is.
Final two questions for you. And one is about presidential politics. Obviously, you support Vice President Kamala Harris in her race for presidency. Do you support her because she is the best person, the most viable person for the job, or do you support her because she's not Donald Trump?
I think she's the best person for the job.
Even though she didn't get one primary vote from the Democratic Party going into this system.
Yeah, I know. And to be honest, she would have gotten my vote. If things had transpired differently, she would have gotten my vote. She is very qualified, and it's honestly a little dismaying to keep hearing people saying, is she qualified? Oh my gosh. As a woman in software, I face that all the time. I have to work harder, work twice as hard, be twice as sharp to...
Is she qualified because she's a woman?
No,
Is that
she's qualified because she has been an attorney general. She has held all these positions. Are you going to ask me the same question about J.D. Vance?
Fair. No, that's
Are
fair.
ya?
Well, but I'm only asking questions of the Democrat about the Democrat, and I would ask the Republicans about the Republicans, and
but
if
yes.
you would like to check it, I will do that. And
No.
in fact, I have done that.
But you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
He is by far the least qualified vice presidential candidate that we've ever had, and people aren't asking questions about his background, and I do understand. I've had people like, she didn't get a vote, but honestly, had she been on the ballot, I would have voted for her.
Okay, fair enough. Last question for you, and if we could keep this relatively short,
Yep.
Why do you think you're the best person on this ballot to represent this district?
Because I am going to actually represent the regular people. The biggest compliment I get is when I go out in an area, and we have put probably close to 7,000 miles on my car, and time again I hear people say, we've never seen a candidate here, we've never seen our representative here. And I'm like, I know, because I need to represent you. I don't need to represent the big money. They can look out for themselves. And so I am a regular working person, and honestly, that's why America is great. It's because of the nose to the grindstone people like me and you that go do our jobs every day that America is great. And lately in the government, we're seeing people that are kind of beholden to special interest or big money, and they're not boots on the ground working and doing the things that everyday Americans do.
Okay. Lori, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to the WSBT 22 YouTube channel.